Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. So my name's Naomi Tosick and I am a co-founder of The Office Space. So we have incredible businesses that are part of our business community, and Hivery is here. Some of the guys from Hivery at the back there. Hi, guys. They just last week won the New South Wales Export Award. Is that what it is, Frankie? Innovation Awards, which is phenomenal. These guys do really great work. And they're in a level that we call the dream level, because it's where we had a company that ended up merging into Boston Consulting Group Digital Ventures. So it's kind of a bit of a lucky space. These guys are moving on soon because they're just outgrowing us and doing some great stuff. But for us, innovation is so important, and it's something that we want to always encourage. Before I launch into our topic, I want to give an acknowledgement of country. I've mentioned to a few people I was lucky enough to be on Heron Island over the last 4 days. I won't say that again. I won't rub that in again. But it was normally Jane Joyce is here from Sydney Community Foundation to give the acknowledgement to country, but I'm so happy to do it today because I'm so full of this sense of connection to country. I was with the Climate Council, and there was just some incredible people, First Nation people, that were really teaching us and a group of us about just the connection to country and the imperative to save our planet as well. So I would like to acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and to acknowledge the leaders and their elders past and emerging as well. So it sets the tone, because it's something that innovation is going to be necessary for a future which is looking quite grim. So we'll get to that as well. It's been said that innovation is creativity with a job to do. So where creativity is thinking of things, innovation is doing new things. Innovation, it's often attributed to agile and emergent tech startups like Hivery. However, it's abundantly clear that we all need to be in this innovation cycle. And a lot of people have said, Rupert Murdoch has also been quick with saying it, that it's no longer about big and small, it's about fast versus slow. And I think that's the real currency that we're dealing with. So this is not just a job for a select few in an organisation. Institutions must weave innovation into all elements of the business fabric as well as their workforce. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that innovation is not just a new thing. We have been innovating for millennia, and you look at some of the bright lights like Marie Curie, or even just Ford with the car. So I think we're always innovating. It's important to remember that. So to shed some light on today's innovation ecosystem, we have three kind of maybe the smartest people in the room at the moment. No offence, but these three are very... I'm looking you all in the eye. But incredibly impressive people, and I'm so honoured to have them. And I want to get straight into the talking, so I'm going to keep their intros quite brief. But first I'll welcome up Sally Ann Williams, who's the CEO of Cicada Innovations, which is Australia's home of deep tech. So we're going to learn about what that is. She's newly minted in that role. It's been 6 months, but before that it was 12 years at Google. 4 months. Oh, wow.
Next week.
Wow, that's very newly minted. And yeah, it's just really incredible the things that she's working on, and involved in a lot of tertiary education before that. Super smart. Someone who can hold his own next to her is Ean Evans. So Ean is partner and intelligence automation leader at EY for Oceania. An avid rugby fan as well. And for Ian, a lot of the work is dealing with a huge team of 150 people and looking at how innovation applies in his sector and also for his clients, which is we're going to get into. And then someone who I've known for a long time, Paul Edwards from Mervac. Please come to the stage. Paul's not feeling great at the moment. Cue cough now. So we're going to finish right on 7 so he can get to his doctor's appointment. So thank you for being here, Paul. But Paul is the General Manager of Workplace Experience. Sally Ann's also got a tickle in her throat. And Mervac, each of these three, the reason I've also chosen because I think they're super intelligent, but they also have won an award. So Cicada was Best Incubator 2018 and 2014, which is huge. The field was about 2,400 global competitors. So that's a huge honour. Ian was involved in the Blue Prism Award.
That's all right.
That's right. And he went and picked that up in UK early in the year, and we'll talk about that. And then Mervac's been named the most innovative property company for this year and doing incredible things in the sustainability space. So I cannot wait for us to jump into this. So let's go, you guys. So when we think of innovation, if you break it down, it's almost about, and Sally Ann, I think, was the one who put it that simply, but it's about doing things better. So I'm going to ask each of you, what are you working to do better in your industry? What does sort of the past and then the future look like? So Sally Ann, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. Great to be here. For me at Cicada, I want to unpack what deep tech is for you really quickly, because I think how many people understand what I'm talking about when I say deep tech? How many people don't know? A lot more hands. Excellent. So I thought let me unpack that first, because I think it will give you the answer to how are we innovating and what are we doing. So deep tech is really fundamentally about solving really hard problems with science and technology. So we incubate companies from 2 founders all the way up till they graduate out from us when they're about 60 or 70 people big. They are solving problems in med tech, health tech, ag tech, food tech, places that are very regulated, IP-driven companies, so a lot of research-intensive sort of companies. So you're not just building an app or doing something great, which there's nothing wrong with building apps and building an online company. You can do lots of wonderful things with those. I worked for one of those companies for many years in the engineering R&D division. But it's really about fundamentally solving problems for people at large scale that are very, very difficult. They're IP intensive, they're capital intensive, they typically have a really long regulatory pathway for good reason, because we don't want to put things into our bodies that might kill us. We want them to cure us. So we want to be careful with that. And they take a really long runway to do that. So on one end of an innovation spectrum, you have somebody that can have an idea and launch a product in market literally within 24 hours. And I have been there and done that with people. And then you have my companies that sometimes in the medical devices space, it can take 8 years to go from lab to animal to, clinical human trials. And so we are fundamentally trying to solve problems around the SDGs. My companies wouldn't state that. They would just state that they're trying to solve problems, like they're trying to cure cancer, they're trying to solve energy and sustainability, they're trying to solve the fact that we're going to run out of food and water, and they're literally building products and services to do that at scale.
Yeah. Great answer.
So that's what we're doing.
Excellent.
About 70 odd companies, 450 people in the building. You should come and visit. It's really fun. We're just
very
over at Everleigh
cool.
South.
Yeah.
South Everleigh, Everleigh.
It's a perfect...
AKA Redfern.
It's a good...
Everleigh.
You guys, I can't get you under control. So it's a great segue to Paul then, because Paul and Sally Ann are neighbours, I guess, in a sense. So Paul, tell us about what you do and how you're involved in innovation and where it links in perhaps with South Everleigh.
Yeah, great. So for us at Mervac, innovation is change that adds value. So we're very focused on identifying areas that customer problems for either ourselves or our own customers. And obviously Mervac, for those that don't know, we work in retail, resi, office, industrial, and build to rent. We have our own construction business. We're very unusual in the property sector in that we are a developer. We have a construction company, we own and we operate, and we're a long-time owner. So for us, it's all about how do we create value for our customers, and we as a business, we generally set ourselves missions every year, and we start to think about how we can use innovation and the process that we've got in place. We have a business called innovation team, called Hatch, which was formed about 4 years ago, and we won 2 awards actually as a group, essentially, we take those missions and I suppose what we've learned is there's a lot more before you ideate, and that's really what we've tried to instill across our business. So rather than just going into a room and going, hey guys, who's got an idea to solve this problem? We do a lot of work around scanning our customers and understanding what the real issue is, working out what the jobs to be done are, and then really starting to think about how we can bring those ideas to life, and so there's. I mean, we'll talk about later on some of our examples, but South Everleigh is an opportunity for us. We bought South Everleigh, which used to be called Australian Technology Park in 2015. I've been involved in it since then. We made commitments when we bought the park that we would create a tech ecosystem. And to be honest, when we wrote that on the paper, everyone kind of looked at me and said, what the hell does that mean? And we've kind of worked out what that means to us and to our partners like Cicada.
Lucky we were already there.
Yeah. And what we're doing is we're basically building off what these guys are already doing, and other partners like Daddy 61 in the space, and then our new tenants like CBA and Quantium who joined us down there, and then my other business that I run called Hoist, which is also going to go down there, which I'll talk about later on as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. And then, Ian, I'll get you to similarly explain some acronyms when you talk about what you do in intelligent automation, RPA. So what is the sort of work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. And EY, a startup of 165 years or so, going strong. I mean, I think that's important, though, because we're a real blend of I guess, businesses within businesses that really look to our purpose is around building a better working world, and that's everything from giving confidence in the capital markets around assurance around financial statements and audits and internal audits, but also tax advice, and then consulting and transaction advice. So I sit in the consulting side of the business, and it's fair to say the world we're in, there's a lot of companies, enterprises, and organisations out there looking for ideas, looking for solutions to wicked problems, and really struggling with, I guess, the pace of change and transition, everything from what is it to be digital, and right through to what's the right policies for ethical AI. Yeah. So it's a really broad range. Paul and I are actually neighbours in the same building, so our teams work together on a couple of projects. But, I think it's a really interesting space and time that we're in at the moment. The fourth industrial revolution, for me, the factors of production have really changed. Technology is really advancing at pace, and society's moving, and I guess our structures are moving at pace as well. So there's a lot of white space and a lot of grey, and with grey comes uncertainty, and that's largely what my teams do. Go in and help solve wicked problems. Sometimes applying emerging technology, but often just trying to take a fresh look at an organisational problem, be that process automation, be that a decision automation, or how do we do this better?
I might unpack that part now. Actually, we're going to talk about that later, but I was reading the EY Innovation Report, which is online, the white paper, and it's incredibly interesting. It talks about RPA, so robotic process automation, which has now been around for a while, and then you have to correct me if I say anything wrong, and then artificial intelligence, but it's intelligent automation, which is referring, perhaps you can define the human kind of technology blend.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll give a couple of examples. I'm not going to name clients, but working with a client recently, they came and said, we want to do an RPA proof of concept, robotic process automation. So really getting software to mimic what humans do, to take that drudgery away from what people do. But they had a challenge with a particular process that they wanted to do a full audit on their on what their organisation had been doing for the last 6 years, but they were scared by the number of hours it was going to take. They worked out it was going to be about 50,000 hours, which is a number of people you would throw at the problem. When you think of some of the industries we work in today, some of the Royal Commissions, those types of risk and audits are required. But what we did, we actually used a bit of code, approached the problem slightly differently, and I think in 6 weeks we'd got to a solution. So there's a notional saving there. It's cost avoidance, certainly, but really just thinking about a problem and not necessarily getting wed on the technology. For me, it doesn't matter which technology or technology set you might apply, but it's how you actually get to the right solution for the client.
And we were talking about examples where sometimes the decision is not to automate because actually it's prohibitive for the, if you look at your cost and investment, it's just not worth the ROI, it doesn't return.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to move back to you, Sally Ann. Julia Gillard has said that our future growth relies on competitiveness and innovation, skills and productivity, and these in turn rely on educating our people. So education is huge for you in your career. maybe talk to us about how, oh, there goes our camera. Talk to us about how, thanks, Oscar, education has been so important to you and why it was important for Google and how you sort of are now dealing with institutions and education.
Yeah, so education is fundamental. If we do not educate our population, people don't have great outcomes. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you if I didn't have a great education, and I got a great education thanks to the state education system. My parents owned a fruit and veggie shop growing up on the Gold Coast, and no one in my family, I'm the youngest of three by a long shot, no one in my family finished high school. So I was the first in my family to finish high school, the first one to do all the STEM subjects at school, and get the great advice from my careers guidance counsellor to do Japanese at university because I would always have a job, right? Which I did. I was 16 when I went to university. I didn't know any better. Dozo yoroshiku onegai itashimasu, sarito moshimasu no de. If you want to go sing Japanese karaoke later, I am your girl. So, you know, for me, finding my way into tech was an accident in my research degree with somebody helping me, taking me shopping for my first computer, which then meant building my first computer. But fundamentally, I think...
Did you hear that? She built her first computer. I think that needs a moment.
Yeah, look, that was interesting. And let's not talk about the next thing when my friend said to me, let me tell you about open source software. And I was like, why isn't there any Windows drivers on here? I don't understand. And proceeded to teach me how to... that's a very long conversation. But fundamentally, if I hadn't had those opportunities, the doors wouldn't have opened to me and I wouldn't have seen the world. I wouldn't have seen the potential for the world around me. This was in an age where Google didn't exist. The internet was only being used by DARPA and, you know, defence groups around the world. So I couldn't see the pathway forward for what my career would be. So education fundamentally taught me how to learn and it taught me how to be curious. It didn't teach me how to be an expert in any one thing. It taught me curiosity and it taught me how to experiment and fail. Now, I will say why it's really important to Google and why I think every single company needs to get a bigger picture and industry needs to get a bigger picture on this in Australia, because fundamentally the thing that is broken is when corporates, and I can say this now, this is great, when corporates get involved in education in Australia, they do it from a CSR perspective, right? We're giving philanthropy and we're giving back, and they stick their brand all over it and it's really great and it doesn't actually have the outcomes that you're looking for. The reason that Google got involved in education in Australia and where it came from was the engineering team. And it's led by engineering and it's very so there's two parts of it. So I'm not talking about the products and services part. I'm talking about the fundamentally why do we care about STEM education and what are we going to do about it. Fundamentally, we got involved in that part for three reasons. Purely selfishly, we wanted to build a pipeline of computer scientists because we couldn't hire enough and there was only 4,000 domestic graduates in this country. Not enough for us, not enough for where industry's needs was, and the rest of industry didn't realise that then. When I started 13 years ago, they weren't recognising that their businesses were actually tech businesses first, not banking, not something else. They were tech first. So fundamentally, we needed to solve that problem for ourselves. But I also worked in the research division where we actually gave philanthropic grants to researchers doing the best and the brightest things to advance their disciplines with no IP. It was done structured as a gift letter. We didn't seek to do anything other than push forward boundaries in disciplines that we were interested in and that we also knew would benefit humanity and in a great way, but wouldn't necessarily have a commercial output. So we're thinking 20-year horizon stuff. So the really blue sky stuff that most of industry in Australia is quite frankly not thinking about. And then the third reason was if they didn't end up in academia, and so we wanted people in pipeline into academia so we would be able to work with them long term. And then the third vision that we had around it was if they didn't end up with us and they didn't end up back in academia, but we could get them to do computer science, they would end up doing startups and build an ecosystem in Australia so we would stop the brain drain. So not one of those things is about returning money into Google, yet Google benefits indirectly by building the ecosystem that we want to have. So we work to fundamentally change the education system here and in lots of places around the world. I've done a couple of countries now to change the curriculum to introduce computational thinking and computer science. And I really want to unpack this because I'm not talking about making everybody coders. Yeah. Computational thinking. Computational thinking is the core skill that every single student fundamentally needs to have, and it's applicable to every discipline, including the arts, including English, including other languages as well. And it's about deconstructing problems, understanding and pattern recognition, and then being able to recompose things, find the knowledge you need and solve them. Pattern recognition is another way that you learn languages, right? Computational thinking is a core skill, and it's fundamentally at the core of entrepreneurial activity and behaviour in life. And so we wanted to put that into the education system, and fundamentally, instead of investing in after-school programs and things that look good and are nice and can have shiny, great activities, spend a lot of time and money in setting up the right structures with educational partners across Australia to invest in professional development for teachers. So we created a new model with Adelaide University. We built the first online platform for in-service professional development training for teachers, completely free, completely open source, completely sustainable. Built out six modules that are still running to this day, and we've had over 10% of the teaching population in Australia, including rural and remote, tenured plus teachers, go through this and transform their students' lives, because they've gone from being people. Sorry, I am harping on about this because education is fundamentally the one thing. If we do anything in Australia, we need to invest in teachers, because teachers at scale, year on year, the return on investment that you get for putting $1 into a teacher's professional development, the payback is 100-fold. I had a teacher run up to me at a conference in Canberra the second year after this program had been piloted, and she was pushing later in the 50s. So she was in her vintage years, and she came up to me and she said, "Are you Sally from Google?" I said, "Yes." And she said, tears streaming in her face, and she said, "I have to hug you." And I said, "Sure, okay, great, thanks." And hugged me, and she said, "I have to tell you why." She's like, "You've changed my life." And I said, "Why? I've never even met you." And she said, "The program that you developed, I was about to retire from teaching because I was told I was going to have to teach computational thinking and computer science, and I thought it was all about coding and I couldn't do it, and I was too old, so I was going to retire early and go find a job in a supermarket or doing something else." She said, "I got recommended to do this course. I went to one of the intro sessions, and then I did it online. I'm now the digital ICT coordinator for my primary school. I teach robotics. I did this." She pulled out her phone, she showed me photos of her classroom's activities, and she said, "And I've trained every teacher in my school how to do this." Yeah. This is what innovation does when you get it right, and when we invest in the right structures in our economy and in our ecosystem in Australia, the payback for that will be 1,000-fold for each teacher. So fundamentally, education has to be a critical thing that we invest in individually and purposefully as corporates.
Well, I want to go in both directions off that. So maybe Ian, first, you're involved in educating other huge companies. So for you, what does that involve, and how does your team sort of impact? Because you're dealing with some companies that if they don't adapt, they're going to be disrupted. So
yeah, look, it's a full range, and it's not just companies. I guess it's also governmental organisations and not-for-profits. So it really depends. And I completely agree with the point about education. I'd say it's probably at all levels.
It's lifelong.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly as we sort of go through, tertiary education but also lifelong learning in the workforce. I think it's incredibly important. I think with 2 young children, it's very front of mind at the moment. I think my daughter swiped the TV when she was 10 months old, when she could just about totter towards it. So that for me was a bit of a wake-up call that tech is moving very, very quickly. And, there's some basic skills that we can give our people and society. So
how do you deal with some of these resistances in that example where people have been working longer in industry? Yeah. You've got an accounting business, essentially, which is going to be superseded. So how do you sort of teach people to adapt for the future?
Well, we're working to make sure that we're innovating in that space. Right. But I mean, that's serious. If you look at what we do, we audit, we do tax. A lot of that's rule-based, and computational thinking and application of AI and other technologies, you can do a lot with Absolutely. That. So we're really looking at how we fundamentally kind of, change and morph those businesses, but also how we build new solutions, new ways of working, and be one step ahead of many of our clients and walking in step. I guess education comes in many forms. So with clients, it's working with various stakeholders, obviously, to sort of work through and bring what we're seeing around the globe. So, there's no one smart person in the room. Nobody is an expert, because the breadth of the spaces that innovation is encompassing is massive. So I think it's about, trying to pull in from the global network, but also the ecosystem that we've built out, the right insights, and bringing that to bear. And that's really, really hard. We've got 262,000 people. So trying to get that right for a client every time is how we're trying to do it. And there's formal mechanisms, but there's also even just educating and training our teams and actually getting them to challenge each other and how you construct teams to have different biases and points of view to try and generate ideas, innovation, and innovative solutions is really, really important.
Well, I'll throw to you, Paul, because we're talking about ecosystems, and I was lucky enough to be at the Impact Investment Accelerator. That's something that Mervac has set up, and maybe you can tell us about that and how you are supporting, because that's another example of a company that is investing out into the community. So what's the motivation and how does that system work for Mervac?
So Mervac have a very strong sustainability plan called This Changes Everything that we set up in 2014, and we made commitments around being net positive by 2030 for energy and water and zero waste to landfill. And also more recently we've set up targets around social impact in our supply chain of 100 million by I think it's 2025. So, we've got some really difficult targets within our business. Our main purpose as a business is to reimagine urban life, and we've got several sort of key values that drive us that way, which is curiosity and bold. So very interesting to hear what Sally's talking about there, and collaboration and do the right thing and how we work. And so as a business, when you kind of set those kind of goals and targets, you need to think outside the box about how you're going to deliver them, and you can only do it by innovating, right? There's no way of delivering those outcomes. And when we launched that program in 2014, Sue Lloyd-Hurwitz, our CEO, basically stood up in front of everyone and said, we don't know how we're going to do this, but if we get 80% of the way there, it's better than not trying at all. And really courageous, and every other property CEO was like, what the hell is she doing? That's weird. But, it was a massive step forward for our business because it drove us to then start to think differently about how we solve things. So move on to 2019. As I said, very heavily involved in South Everleigh. We've made commitments to create a tech ecosystem there. We've done a lot of research, written some papers on smart precincts, and also done a lot of research on tech ecosystems. We understand what the ingredients are to help us to deliver that, and so we set up a business called Hoist, which is essentially a flexible space business, but it's all about driving innovation within the precinct and working with our partners, of course. And through that process as well, we started to look at, well, how do we solve some of these problems we've got? So we also set up a business called Mervac Ventures, which is a fund, but it's a strategic fund, so it doesn't have to have a financial return. It literally is about investing in products and businesses that will help us to solve our strategic issues and challenges. And so they actually helped us to fund the Impact Investment Accelerator. So the Impact Accelerator was launched about 10 weeks ago. We've partnered with Inco, which is a French organisation. They've got 40 accelerators in 35 countries. They've got a VC fund in France as well. They came to Australia on the back of work they were doing with Ramsay Healthcare, who are the second largest healthcare provider in France. And so I got to meet them, and we've been working with those guys ever since. And they introduced us to Artesian, who are, I think they're the second or third largest VC fund in Australia with 350 million under management, who in turn have a relationship with CEFC, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. And so we struck a tripartite deal where we set up a impact accelerator. For those that don't know, impact means it has to have a social or environmental outcome as part of the business, as well as a financial one, obviously. But the environmental and social is the most important thing. And we ran a process. We had 75 submissions. We shortlisted 20, and a couple of weeks ago we did a pitch night, which was a lot of fun. And we've now shortlisted 11 companies who will join the program for 9 months. What's great for Mervac is that our view on learning is that a lot of it's around on the job and working with different businesses. Like working with corporates is one thing, but working with startups, entrepreneurs, scale-ups is a totally different thing. How they work, the approach to solving problems is very different. So actually this gives us an opportunity for our business and our people to actually work with these people and actually provide mentorship for them on what we would class as normal day-to-day stuff, and in return, our guys are actually getting mentorship and learnings out of it as well. And so we are literally about to kick off the 9-month program. Inco managing it all for us, and it's really exciting. We've got some great companies on there, right from renewable energy, farming, through to social procurement and green banking. So a whole range of different businesses that will help us to hopefully solve some of our issues.
And Paul's being very modest when he speaks about, I just realised this tonight, there's Susan Lloyd-Hurwitz, the CEO of Mervac, has just been such a transformational leader by putting that out there in 2014, and it's an industry that obviously as a serviced office operator we're involved in, and it's Paul actually wrote that whole paper, so you're kind of the man behind the woman in a way, which I think is really exciting.
I was. I did it for 3 years, and now it's handed over to Sarah Clark, leads it very well for us now, and I've changed roles. But because it's part of my roots, I'm very, very focused on it. I mean, just one example that I love, and it's because it's South Everleigh. So we wanted to, when we were doing the South Everleigh, when I started South Everleigh, I was asked to write a visioning statement for South Everleigh about what is it we're trying to achieve here. So we got all the community together, and we met with people from the Redfern Community Centre. And I said to Lady Christine, what is it you really, what is it we could do for you? And she said food. That was the one thing they wanted more than anything else. And she meant like local food, affordable food. So it's pretty hard to deliver like a food solution in a precinct. So we looked at whether we could. I got fascinated with trying to create a farm on the site. And much to the dismay of my colleagues, I kept pushing for it, and eventually won. And we put we've recently opened the first ever Indigenous rooftop farm and Aboriginal cultural garden called Yerrabingin. And the two guys, Clarence and Christian, who run it, are fantastic entrepreneurs. And we enabled them to create a business, and we helped them to not only create the business, we gifted them the roof so that they could, and the soil and pretty much everything else to help them get going. We've given them the contract for landscaping on the entire precinct. And off the back of that, they're now, they're going great guns. They have events there all the time. They've got, ministers coming down. It's and they've been asked, by architects from New York to get involved in designing Indigenous gardens. And it's just been a fantastic thing. But part of the reason that I love the idea was not because we were going to grow, it's not acres and acres of farmland that we can grow loads and loads of food and supply food to everyone. So the whole philosophy was, how do we educate people on how they can eat healthy, how they can eat Indigenous food? And so we are working with a very well-known chef at the moment to sort of give advice to that. But we've also got CBA take some of the food and use it in their kitchens. We have events for the community. We have events that help to raise awareness to health and well-being, but also, and this is again something that I really like about the whole thing, is that it's also about Aboriginal culture. And Redfern / Everleigh is obviously a very steeped in a lot of history around Aboriginal culture and the Indigenous population, and ensuring that they had fair wages. It was one of the first places in Australia that they got equal wage. Obviously the Great Strike, there's a lot of history there. And so we really wanted to bring that to the fore, and it ticks all the boxes from a sustainability perspective, but ultimately it meets the need of our community. And, we talk about education and computers and tech and all that, but ultimately, some of the other things we still need to educate people on is health and well-being and food, and access to nature has a great impact on mental health as well. And so, I talk about that for ages, but...
Well, I want to, I'm going to find out, Ian, from you some of the problems that you're solving for clients. But Sally-Ann, because of your proximity, tell us about so as an incubator and accelerator, what are you doing within Cicada, and what's that ecosystem like?
Yeah, so inside of Cicada, as I sort of mentioned earlier, we have about 70 companies at any given time, employing about 450 people in new industries and new jobs. So In the sort of health space, we have a company in there called Speedx that does diagnostics and therapeutics. They started there. They actually started out of J&J Labs collapsing over here, or I shouldn't say collapsing, but determining to shut down their Sydney-based operations or their Australia-based operations in the GFC. And the two founders came out of there. It was really great, Alice and Todd, and I'm going to blank on the name. That's terrible. And her founder, but Ali was, as she said, on the wrong side of 50, and it was her PhD student she'd supervised that was a postdoc at that point that decided to found the company. They're now headquartered with us, but have offices in the US and in the UK and do $1 million orders in the clean room facility that we have. So we have advanced manufacturing production there. They are solving a problem that's unsexy to talk about. They talk about STI testing. Now, the challenge with STIs is they're massively on the rise everywhere in the world, like everywhere, not just developing economies, but actually in this country as well. And the problem with STIs and treatments is superbugs and antibiotic resistance. So if you don't treat them efficiently and quickly, the health complications that you get can be severe and lead to, things that are debilitating for you, but also have a massive burden on the healthcare system overall. Their test not only diagnoses, but actually marks the antibiotic resistance. So it means that the antibiotics that they get right up will work and treat. Multi-million-dollar company, tiny little place, most modest people ever. Ali was awarded, was inducted as a fellow into the Academy of Science and Technology last week. So that's one example. 10 years to bring that product to market and be at the size that they're at. Phenomenal, game-changing stuff. No one's ever heard of them. This is the stuff that we need to change and make it heard of.
And people can see this on the website. You can have a look.
I'm going to give you 3 examples really quick, I promise. We've got another one called Gelion, which is amazing. So Gelion is a clean battery company. They're a spin-out of University of Sydney. This is a perfect example of research spin-outs. Professor Thomas Maschmeyer is there. It's his 6 companies spun out, 4 are still surviving. And they are a lithium battery competitor. They have no rare earths in it. So at the end of its life cycle, this battery is 100% recyclable. And the gel within the Gelion, within the zinc bromide solution, is actually a fire retardant, and they're going after a commercial market. So, it's really great to be in a precinct with people who believe in innovation, because guess who their potential customers are? Right here on my left. And actually right here on my left too, the other company that I think is really cool is I have a farm in my lobby. And I have a farm factory. So Invertigrow is one of our companies, and they do vertical farming, but they do vertical farming using 6% of the energy in the water that traditional farming would take. They grow 30% faster with a better outcome. And they can actually, their real go-to-market strategy, the one that you see in our lobby, which you're welcome to come in and look at, is a display model, and it's not the production model. Production model is a giant pallet that you can't look into, that is stacked warehouse high somewhere out at Airtropolis, and going on to feed the world, because you can do this at scale and you can actually do disease prevention and everything else. It's potentially an alternative revenue stream for farmers. I'm going to lie, I'm going to tell you one more.
Okay, go for it. Go.
Sorry. Another company, I could go all day. I've got such amazing companies. There's a real reason to get out of bed every morning. Not that I didn't have it at Google before, but I really have it these days. Sustainate, which I really, really love. Sustainate is dealing the problem with food waste. So every single farm, about 80% of what they produce on it is completely wasted. So in your sugar production, in your wheat, in your rice, in whatever, 80% of that is pure waste. And we have a massive food waste problem, not just food waste from Woolworths or Coles or supermarkets, but food waste on farm. They can actually take that waste and they can build a production facility on site with the farmer from largely of what they've got there. They can do an enrichment process and actually turn that into a second revenue stream for farmers, and God knows they need it, which is a nutrient-enriched fodder for animals, for livestock. Right, so they're not only solving a problem of a second revenue stream for farmers and dealing with food waste, but they're also solving a problem of the fact we don't have enough feed for animals. Yeah. This is the kind of stuff that's happening in Cicada every single day. And the founders come, can I tell you one more? Because there's a one more.
No. Talk to Sally Ann later.
So many, but this is what we're kind of trying to do. And so come visit us.
Ian, can you tell us some of the amazing, can you compete with that? What are some of the projects?
Make banking and accounting sexy.
So one of the big wicked problems we've been trying to solve recently, and we're currently doing this. We've built a platform that we call the Citizen Intelligence Platform, but its real genesis and roots came out of some challenges with looking after children in harm or peril who have to be in foster care or because of various reasons, and often I think society and the way that they've been treated and cared has been sort of very positive, but a lot of the interventions have been in crisis mode. So when something happens, then they do X or Y. So one of the things we've been working very, very hard around is building a platform that can help society, but specifically the agencies and the families and the children at the centre to get better preventative early interventions. So it might be somebody's having a child's having a traumatic incident who's in foster care, and really trying to when the foster parent rings up, there's currently a contact centre that takes that call to try and help. But actually having the data at the fingertips of the person on the phone to understand what has happened in that child's history to better advise or better inform and maybe identify challenges. Now there's a whole lot of stuff around ethical AI and data and privacy, which are very, very important around this. But really, we've been building a platform that has been taken up by, I think, five agencies, government agencies globally now, that really helps to do that. At its heart, there's a bit of technology to get the data, to extract it from court extracts and PDF documents and label it, tag it, assimilate it so that it can be used. And then an end-to-end sort of automation and sort of platform and capability. But, I guess the goal there is to really, reduce the cost of care, so you can support more children in that specific example, but it's also flexible, so you can use it on a range of wicked problems, particularly in the governmental sector. So that's something, and for me, it really brings, to do that well. It's not just technology; it's people, process, adoption, change, the last mile to and how you deal with each of those interventions. And for me, that's very exciting, and again, it requires a lot of investment, and that's been one of the journeys EY's been helping a number of agencies around the world do.
It's solving a real problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a pretend problem.
Exactly, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that it's no longer about being the fastest and kind of making the most money. It's about solving these wicked problems, that intractable world problems like climate change and social issues, but also making money or being able to create efficiencies as well. I might even just ask you again, what are some of the digital enablers and tools that you're using, and are things like voice recognition becoming more? What do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, look, it's I mean, we've got various government agencies using blockchain now, globally, still often in pilot stages, but it's really...
I'd love you to give us a definition. I know everyone knows blockchain, but can you do one in a sentence or the...
Oh, luckily we've got a little while, but really, for me, it's really about creating a high degree of trust in underlying data by effectively sharing it around. So no one element of that database is easily corrupted. So we're using it in a trial in one of the state governments in Australia at the moment to actually look at how public finances are distributed. And whilst that's not necessarily the most exciting topic, making central treasury in a state understanding how the money is being spent and where it's being spent is quite important. And guess what? In the background, the systems don't all talk to each other. So looking at innovative ways to solve that. So that would be one. There's huge applications of computer vision technologies that are out there now, and voice and natural language processing technologies that are very exciting. Being able to translate, from different languages, and seeing avatars able to sort of translate in almost real time is, the technology exists, and the opportunities exist. I think really with our clients is about what we're actually trying to solve here. And, it's very easy to get excited about the new kit or the new toy or the new tech, but, what are we fundamentally trying to do? And technology is often part of the solution. And being able to do technology at pace is very important for a number of organizations, but it's really trying to, work with clients to make that happen.
And I feel it has been that shift where we were worried about robots stealing our jobs, and now it's like, what can we do with this technology? So maybe I'll come down with each of you. I just want to ask you about the culture of innovation. How do you create a culture within Mervac at all levels, and how might smaller businesses also create that culture of innovation, so it's not just for the Hatch team, but it sort of sits through the whole company?
So one, you need senior leader buy-in. Our CEO is very much aware that if you stand still, then change happens around you much faster than you're going, and therefore you're dead basically. So you need to have a very clear leadership direction. Two, I think you need an environment where it's safe to fail. You learn so much more from failure than you do from pretty much anything else. And you find a lot of environments, if you fail, it's kind of hidden and, no one talks about it because it's not a good thing. And so, we very much have been on a journey within Mervac since Sue arrived, really 6 years, about how do we kind of instill that in people, that it's okay. If you fail, it's fine. You learn from it and move on. I think the other thing is that we have spent an incredible amount of time looking at really the science of innovation, rather than just thinking about it as, hey, as I said, like, let's get on in a room and let's innovate. It's actually, we've got a process that we follow. We have a program of training for our ambassadors. So we have 75, actually more than that, 90 ambassadors across our business. All have gone through training, and every year we put 20 people through that. So you're constantly renewing. And what we found that does is, the training that they're doing rubs off on everyone else. Innovation ambassadors. We have a group of innovation volunteers who take part in a lot of the customer scans, for example. We did originally have 8 missions as a business, and they range from how do we use underutilised assets, to how do we improve construction techniques for the future, to how do we change the behaviours, the sustainable behaviours of 250,000 people. No biggies, all simple. We run them through a process. We set a mission, we run a scan, we set a challenge off the back of that scan, we ideate, and then we go into experimentation or prototyping, and then we might pivot and go back, and then we'll go into the implementation and promotion of those. We've also, we set up there's a ring-fenced amount of money, I think it's $1 million, that sits, can't be touched, even if the company starts to go in a different direction. And that is used to help us experiment. If you want to experiment, you can only spend $15,000 in maximum. So we use lean, mean startup methodology. And then, it's really about making sure everyone understands that, this is how we do it. You've got to think about that process. To give you an example, another farming example actually is we had a team looking at underutilised space. We felt that with the changing modes of transport, the car parks will change over time. So we decided to look at urban farming. We partnered originally with a group called Farmwall, and we started a business called Cultivate by Mervac. And downstairs in our building, and Ian's probably been in it, we've got a farm. We built for $15,000. What was really interesting for us was we started this thinking, we're going to sell food to the local restaurant and they're going to make enough money and it's all going to be good. But actually, the unintended consequence of it was that we originally started with just Mervac, then some friends of mine at EY asked if they could get involved, and then we basically ended up with EY joining us, then AGL joined us. And what we found that our customers were actually having a conversation over lettuce instead of over accounting, which was really good from a community building perspective. Yeah. So Westpac came and I took Westpac around it, they loved it. So we built another one for them, invested more money in it jointly. It was meant to run for 12 months, 12 weeks, it ran for 9 months. It's only stopped now because we're continuing with the refurb of that ground plane. We're now Invertigrower, one of our farm providers in that space. It's helped us to understand how we can actually create an income that can self-sustain the business. We invested in Farmwall as a result of it as well. And Cultivate we'll have a permanent space there. But the other great thing about this was that in this case, Westpac have the whole building at 275 Kent Street. They started to look at mental health and started to think about, well, if someone comes in, what are the state when they leave? Do they feel less stressed? Are they happier? And, started to ask some really just simple questions. And it's very subjective, obviously, but the results were outstanding. Like 94% of people felt happier when they left and less stressful and all that sort of stuff. And so, Westpac bought into the whole idea, and now we're sort of working on the business case to grow it with Invertigrow and with other businesses to see how many more of these things together. But the whole process we went through was, what's the mission? How do we scan our customers? What is it they're after? What's the idea? We went into set some challenges. We ideated on it and we bring external people into that, and then we ran the process. People from across Mervac worked on that.
It's open source, people from outside of Mervac and bringing different companies in.
Yep.
So Sally Ann, for you, I want to look at the culture for women. So you are incredibly involved in this space. Sally bought Grace Hopper Down Under, which was a big maybe you tell us about that, and Tech Girls Are Superheroes, and how important it is to get girls into this space. Yeah,
look, I think it's really important to be inclusive in this space, and inclusive isn't just women, but I do think it's a good place to start. And it's absolutely critical because good ideas come from anywhere, and if you don't have a representative body around the table, you're not getting the best ideas. And so just let me give you a quick example of this, because I think it's important to unpack it with a real story, right? So seatbelts, when they were first introduced and regulated, were actually hurting and injuring women and children at disproportionate numbers because they were only ever tested on the average male crash test dummy. They didn't actually, women and children size crash test dummies didn't exist. Airbags were killing children and were actually disabling women when they were introduced because they were only tested on the average male crash test dummy. Now, it's not because there's a bunch of men and a bunch of engineers that sat around the table and evilly said, how can we hurt women and children? But nobody was there to go, well, who else sits in the front seat of a car and what effect might that have? And so it's really critical that you get diversity of thought, not just from a gender perspective, from a whole bunch of other backgrounds around the table when you're coming to innovation and ideas. So for me, I'm passionate about this. I'm really tired of being the only woman in the room at an executive level in the space that I work in, and that's happened to me not just in Google but in most of the partners that I worked with and in a lot of the universities that I worked with. So fundamentally there's this thing, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so I think with innovation and with entrepreneurship and with being problem solvers, we actually have a responsibility to visibly role model the up and comers. It's great that we have some incredible stories of innovation in Australia. I love Cochlear. It's amazing. There are 100 other stories that we need to tell and people we need to spotlight. And so the AnitaB.org is the not-for-profit in the US that runs Grace Hopper celebration. It's the largest celebration of technical women. Please note, technical women, not just women in tech, because they are two groups and they are not the same, because I do not have a marketing background at all. I spend my time in tech, and it's no disparagement to anybody that does, but if you send me to a Women in Tech event that is focused on, customer acquisition and growth strategy through marketing, I'm just going to sit there and go, but if you talk to me about AI and the latest in computer vision and what we're doing to automate and scan and do diagnostics, I'm going to be like, yes, I'm all in on this, and tell me about that problem there. So we brought that conference, it's 24,000 people in the US, 24,000 women technologists that go to it around the world to the US conference. We brought that to Australia this year. And what I want to say about it, and why I think one of the cultures that what we have to do is to change this for women and to change this for other people who are underrepresented in this space, is we actually have to put our money where our mouth is and our efforts behind things like this. The inaugural year there, we couldn't get tech companies who sponsored this event, who do sponsor this event in the US, to sponsor the event in Australia. They said, we want to wait and see if it's successful. And what that says to me is you don't have a culture of innovation because you're not willing to buy into and work towards a dream, and you're not willing to potentially fail, and so you're not willing to put where your mouth is. And you are a $1 billion valuation company, right? I was luckily at Google, so I did put my money where my mouth is, or I put their money where their mouth is in my personal time. But we actually have to do this. And I think when we talk about an innovation culture in Australia, one of the challenges that we're lacking is we're very, very good at talking about it. But sometimes that heavy lifting behind it, we don't always do that. And we have to start, and we have to not be afraid of a failure. And we have to make sure that it is an inclusive conversation, that we're bringing all voices to the table, because that's the only way we're going to do this and make a significant change. And let me make no mistake, there is an actual imperative to do this, because we can't just keep digging rocks out of the ground. That is not going to be our economic security in 50 years' time and in 100 years' time. So we actually have an imperative not to just sit here and hope that our businesses last and sustain themselves because things look good, but we have to be reinventing and breaking and reinventing ourselves as corporations and as companies every single day, so that we're building that what's next. And we're not just investing in what's next, but we're actually building it. And the way that you do that is to be incredibly curious and incredibly focused on what is the problem we're trying to solve. We've all talked about that. You can come up with a great idea, but unless it's fundamentally solving a problem for a person and a large group of people, there will be no customers for it. But if you solve that problem for them in an elegant way that is beautiful, you will absolutely fundamentally build a new economic base in this country that is not just tech, but is actually human-centred, technology-capable companies that are solving real problems around food, around energy, around health and well-being, around advanced manufacturing, poverty, inclusiveness, all of those things. And we actually can do it if we all lean into it and recognise that every single one of us has a role to play in this. It's not just for one organisation. It's something that every single person can actually have a role to play in their day-to-day in what you can influence and what you control.
So beautifully put. And also Sally-Ann is very involved in lots of peak bodies and industries. So this message is...
I'm overcommitted.
She's lucky to be here, but constantly this is pushing out, which I think is important. 100%. So Ian, within EY and also within the companies that you work with, what do you see as a successful culture of innovation? What works?
So I think a lot of what was said by Paul and Sally-Ann resonates. So if you look across what we are as an organisation, over 260,000 people, we've got venture teams, Silicon Valley and others. We've got investments in entrepreneur organisations, incubators, locally, the Foundry in 200 George Street, but also we sponsor Entrepreneur of the Year, which we believe that very much in startup and innovation often comes in that sort of startup environment, and it's important. And I'd also say a very big ecosystem of partners, alliances, and other stakeholders outside of EY. But I think the sort of culture of innovation for me sort of starts at the top with the tone at the top and sort of sponsorship through the organisation, but it really permeates through all of our leaders, and it's the moments when they ask, could we do this differently? Could we do this better? That for me is a really key thing. So one of the things we do look at is, how do we inspire and motivate our people, but also, increasingly, how do we work with our clients to do this? Because no one organisation is going to have all the answers. Complex solutions or elegant solutions to complex problems often require a real ecosystem. So it's really sort of building the right relationships, which are ultimately human, and then working through how you actually take value out of that and do the right thing. But certainly I think certainly with all the teams that I work with and my team work with, it's amazing the capabilities inherent in our people and in our clients' teams. But really it's about for me it's how you unlock that and give it a sort of a situation where you can thrive, and that individual can come up with an idea or take it through to first proof of concept, or and really have a go. So that's one thing I personally work very, very hard at with my teams, is to create that sort of, hey, that's why don't we have a go at that, or is there a way we could make that happen? Yeah, absolutely, and sort of stretch thinking. And I think that's part of our role as, I guess, good corporates in this society.
I would love to keep talking, but these three have commitments outside of here. So I'm going to take maybe 2 questions from whoever's the first up with their question, or none. Anyone? Here we go. In the back there, yeah.
Yeah. I think 5 to 6 years ago, we weren't hearing these types of conversations. And I think, it'd be really interesting to know from you guys in the next 2 to 4 years what types of conversations, because things grow exponentially. are we going to be happy?
Yeah.
Because I think the thing about education, my daughter's a 25-year-old, teacher, and what you're talking about there now is really exciting for me to hear. So,
I mean, I will take a stab at it because 5 to 6 years ago, I was definitely having these conversations around Australia and actually driving it. And if anybody's sick of innovation theatre or some of the buzzwords out there, I'm sorry, because I was probably largely responsible with a group of people behind the scenes on that. Because I started working on really pushing this space and growing this space and helping, build Fish Burners, which was, our first co-working space in the tech space anyway, a long time ago. And I think the conversation's a really necessary one, but we haven't brought everybody along on it. So it's a conversation that needs to happen. But for me, I left Google because I wanted to work at where the next conversation is. And the next conversation, I think, for Australia is evolving the conversation from tech to deep tech and actually understanding that the wealth that we have in this country and the capacity that we have from deeply knowledgeable people in the scientific and beyond community, but in our research community and academia and generally, we are not capitalising on it. We are literally sitting on a gold mine that we have not developed. And we have not yet had corporate Australia at large recognise that they should be spending a significant part of their of their finances each year on deep R&D and long-term R&D. And I think it's because we haven't had a burning platform in Australia, right? America, it's really interesting. You see what happened in the GFC and you see what happened in America and in Europe, and there was literally overnight entire industries gone, not disrupted, gone, completely gone. So massive job losses and massive challenges in society. And what happened was, and what's really interesting is what you see whenever this has happened in history, those firms have doubled down on R&D and they've put their money in really some crazy ideas, building the what's next and building with a long-term investment. Having spent 13 years in Google, what's really interesting to me, everybody's talking about AI now. We were talking about AI when I joined the company 13 years ago and being an AI first company. So the timeframes, the two things that we need to kind of do in Australia is think actually 13 and 15 years ahead, and quite frankly, business in Australia, SMEs and all the way through to the top end of town needs to have a much longer time frame. If you're solving the problem for your customers now, you're not really, I would argue, you're not really innovating at the level that you could be and that you should be, because you should be able to future-proof yourself by building new business models and new opportunities that don't exist yet. Now, the example of that I give is around the mobile phone. You never knew you wanted something in your pocket that would give you driving directions, that would be your camera, that would do more. You never knew you wanted something more than a phone to send an SMS, right? Until it was in your hands and then you wanted it. And so I think we have the capacity in this country to do it. Like, we have the knowledge, we have the know-how, we have the IP, we actually have the money, the capital is out there, it's not being deployed in it. And so for me, the fundamental opportunity that I see is that to grow the deep tech part of the ecosystem. The tech part's growing and we've got more venture capital than ever before being deployed in our tech companies, and it's great, but we're not deploying in the harder stuff, and the harder stuff is going to build an economic base, for our country that is the next minerals boom. Yeah. So for me, that's what gets me out of bed these days.
I'm going to leave it at just that one question so Paul can get to the doctor. But I think that point about the burning platform, and Sally Ann and I were talking, we didn't have the GFC, and so we didn't have that issue. I told you they're the three smartest in the room. Please thank these guests here. And next month is our last insight. You'll see at the bottom in the grey, it's on leadership, which is so relevant. Peter is here in the room. He's going to actually be on the panel. And Felicity is here in the room as well, who is involved in diversity, inclusive leadership. So it's so relevant to everything that we've talked about here. It's a really nice segue. So we hope to see you next month. Thanks, everyone. Well done. Get out.